published together as well. It's Internationalization, Quality Assurance, and Curriculum Change, and Steve's well on his way to having his doctorate in education. I finished my PhD, and we're both sort of in the same area, so we've got a good crossover.
So we both work at Tokyo University of Science, and just to give you an idea of the level of the students, these are the types of companies and places they go to after they've graduated. So in order to get into the university in the first place, they've had to have gone through jumped through a lot of hoops and studied very hard. So even though they're not studying English, they have good study.
Is that okay?
It's fine, yes, perfect.
Okay, good.
Good study techniques and habits. So let's go on. Let's move on quickly on. So these guys, mostly guys, depending on the faculty and the department they're in, it's mostly like 90% men and things like that.
So when we talk about internationalization, globalization, you need to think of them really as two very distinctly different phenomena. And there's a tendency to want to confuse the two. But Jane Knight, Yonizawa, Denman, Hans DeWitt, all of us, Watanabe, all of us see them as two very distinct phenomena. Globalization has been around a long, long time. It's probably as early as we could put boats in the ocean kind of thing. Internationalization is a fairly recent phenomenon within the last 100 years or so. Essentially, internationalization is an institutional response to a whole range of dynamics that are very complex, which make up globalization. And right now we're into what we call a storming stage, or what we see as hyper-competitive environment. And those dynamics act on various institutions, and the effects on those institutions, of course, internationalization is a response to that. So internationalization, you need to think of it essentially as reform, some kind of reform initiatives that are underway. In the case of universities within various countries, it's usually a movement from national to an international. It involves competition and cooperation, both at the institutional level, but also within the institution. And reasons for rationales that make up, Jane Knight's done a lot of studying on this, as has Hans DeWitt, but essentially it comes down to prestige and branding, income generation, so increasing the economic benefits for the institution, agency, or what we call human agency, or at the institutional level, capacity building, at the individual level, hopefully capability building. And it oftentimes involves building strategic alliances and networks, and of course knowledge production.
So we're going to touch on these four parts of the typology that, well, who made these?
I did. These are what we call domains, really, and other research I've done has shown this. Last year I was here, I did a co-presentation. Steve couldn't be here for that, but it was on corruption, higher education, and essentially I used those same domains for that. But when we talk about internationalization, those are the domains, and there are a number of descriptors, as our earlier presenter indicated. There are many descriptors that fulfill that, but within that framework we came up with a number of ones.
So talking of complexities, which is one of the elements of the title of our presentation, we thought, well, what's bubbling up there? So what can we pay attention to? So we chose these four parts, things to focus on today. So you can see the red is then the green, and the purple and the blue are
knowledge dimensions, validation, recognition, structural variation, governance, and policy, which is most important, and involves leadership and management.
And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on reforms, and specifically the curriculum reforms that have gone on where we teach in Tokyo University of Science. So if I continue on to the next slide, which touches on what all of these parts on the right, research and collaboration, cross-border and academic programs, curriculum, funding modes, and vision and leadership.
Something else we did was drawing on the work of Harvey and Green back in 1993 in the early 90s, and also Jane Knight's done work on this in 2001 and 2003 too. Basically, with my PhD, I put together a typology here that involves looks at different aspects of quality, and that was a big part of my PhD thesis. And Quality in terms of excellence, quality in terms of zero errors, quality in terms of transformation, organizational transformation, institutional transformation, threshold quality, equality in terms of enhancement, and fitness for purpose quality. And then what we've done here is organize various features of quality that align with each of those domains within a particular band. And in the case of quality of excellence, that's usually frequently used within higher education. In a general sense, there's a kind of traditional understanding of what that's about, and it's about doing, for us, many of us, the best job possible. Quality in terms of zero errors really comes from TQM, Total Quality Management, which actually has been used to varying degrees in success in the US, very much less so when it was introduced in the early 90s in the UK. Quality in terms of transformation, that's organizational transformation. That goes to the heart of internationalization, and I think that's something that Steve and I really related to in terms of saying, okay, well, which one represents what we're doing in our context. Quality in terms of threshold, externally driven, imposed standards. Various third-party evaluation organizations in different countries. It's very top-down driven. It doesn't necessarily account for institutional context. It's check the boxes and lots of surveillance. Here, quality in terms of enhancement. Here we need to think about, this comes from Teichler, actually, caustic. And in terms of think about, is it sort of a one-off kind of thing in terms of improvement? Is it static? Is it continuous? Is it ongoing? Is it dynamic? Here, quality in terms of fitness for purpose really goes to the idea of, are the leaders in the institution able to articulate a vision? And when you walk into that institution, can everybody there tell you what their mission is and how it aligns with that vision? And if they can't do that, especially if a university is internationalizing, you're in for big trouble. It's not going to be successful.
So what we're doing is we're focusing on quality of transformation today, and giving you some examples of how the teachers are feeling at Tokyo University of Science. That's where I've come in, and I've been, for my Doctor of Education, I've been interviewing the tenured professors there, who all come from the literature background. So what we're doing, I'll just introduce the Tokyo University of Science a little bit. It's got about 20,000 students, and where we are, Anthony and I teach is out in Noda in Chiba. It's got about 5,000 to 7,000 students there. 2 faculties, 12 departments. So the English group where I teach and Anthony teaches too, servicing the science departments. So it takes a lot of, when the curriculum, English curriculum is reforming, as it has done over the last 2 to 3 years. David is also teaching with us. There has been a lot of changes and a lot of planning, and it takes a long time to implement. So we've had a lot of sleepless nights and early mornings. So the main thing is that the number of communication classes has dramatically increased from 11 to 110, and that's the number of English classes, and the number of communicative classes has gone up something like 200%. I mean, up to 300 classes. So we've got a lot of not only the foreign native speaker teachers, but Japanese part-time teachers and Japanese full-time teachers are all teaching much more communicative-oriented classes now. And so what we're going to do is, for the next number of slides, we're going to introduce some of the beliefs and attitudes that the Japanese professors have there, who all come from, the 6 of the 7 who I interviewed, they come from a literature background, and one of them is from a linguistics background. Because these are the very people who've planned and have been implementing they didn't come from a top-down, you will do these things. It was all us together trying to create a good curriculum. So let's move on to the next slide.
This takes us then to educational borrowing. Educational borrowing, of course, comes from comparative education. It's been around probably as long as sociology has been around. Julien de Paris, 1775 to 1848, he did the initial work. In terms of transfer, with educational borrowing, we talk about it in terms of mirroring, lending, borrowing. It really comes down to a functional approach. The early people that worked on that in the 60s, Holmes, well recognized for it in terms of problem approach to, okay, we got a problem, let's borrow something from over here, adopt it, implement it, and hopefully makes things better. Is it good? Is it useful? Those were the issues or questions that Fraser came up with in '64. And Noah and Erickson, really famous, they thought their perspective was if we're going to borrow, it has to be practical for the sciences, and our university here is a science-based university. And is it deliberate, and it has to be purposeful. So all of those speak to a kind of functionality when we look at borrowing something from another context. And to illustrate that, functional borrowing here, for example, would have been the police box system. That was brought in from Paris, 1860s, Meiji reforms, and adapted for this context, and is really quite successful for what it has achieved. It was in turn borrowed from Japan and put into place in Singapore, and later borrowed from here and implemented into Hawaii, another very different context and for different reasons. Go.
Okay, so moving on, we'll try to move a bit more quickly. We've got a lot of teachers' quotes here. This teacher, he's the first two slides. He's saying that it's what he's been doing is the good old-fashioned way of reading and translating.
My style of teaching here is the classical Japanese style of teaching English. I let the students read some English passages, and then I let them translate into Japanese, and that's the classical way. And in the writing class, I give students some Japanese sentences or passages, and then I translate. This time into English, I think it was simple.
Simple is the key. He's very, very, doesn't want to change so much. So, but now we're moving on to this new style. So I think the type of tradition should be blended into the type of Western style logic. So I think it is good, not bad, but we should not ignore the very, very long traditional Japanese learning style. So we're doing, like you said, not like a paint, but connecting it, trying to restructure everything, but not changing too much, so the students won't be unhappy and the teachers won't be unhappy. So thinking of the past, what was Tokyo University of Science like 10, 12 years ago? If I can ask the question. So in your experience, what was it like 12 years ago?
Yeah, this university used to be, well, I dare say, closed to the world.
Like an island?
An island, yeah, very isolated from the trends of internationalization or globalization.
So now the things are changing, and what's been happening?
You know, compliance. The university has begun to need more compliance than ever, more rules and strictness, and I think it is good sometimes and not good sometimes, rules, strictness, compliance.
So what with the government funding, how are you going to be able to show that you've adopted some of the things that the government is trying for us to move towards, to improve students' communicative English, not just their ability to understand, read and write. So what we've done is we've moved from passive to a more active learning style. It's only been a couple of years, but little by little we're wondering whether the teachers can adopt this learning style, teaching style, or be able to adapt themselves to it.
Passive to the adaptive. I welcome the change here because, for example, in reading classes, many teachers have students translate English sentences into Japanese, and that's all. They understand the meaning and they are relieved, and that's the end of the class, and that was the goal of the class.
And because these students are science students, they're not particularly interested in English. So this teacher is saying, in my personal view, ordinary Japanese learners of English need both. It's not fair, at least to me, to promote classes in English in place of classes on English. So we need to keep some grammatical learning and reading and writing, especially for science students, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to have a lot of need to read and write in English, but not necessarily speak it so much. And here are the four main points that the teachers who I interviewed, the Japanese teachers who helped to create and implement the curriculum, have. What are the challenges they have to the adoption of CLT type classes? So CLT type, as you say, can be connected with CLIL and others, CBI, EMI. So let's go through one by one. So the first challenge is that a long-held tradition in English teaching will end.
You know, speaking, listening, communicating by spoken language in English is needed more than ever so. We have to change. We are being forced to change the English curriculum, I think.
Because of globalization and internationalization.
Business, yes, that's right. Demand from business, companies, and corporations.
So there's an external value here. The curriculum has been changed. Maybe it's being forced to change by a Japanese, perhaps what's it called now, Kuki or Yonderu now. So from what people are saying, people are changing because of not from something which is being forced by the government, but actually maybe it is because that's where the money is, right? In order to get the funding, you have to change. So in order to keep quality, what are we trying to do?
This kind of effort is politically correct. The more you do it, the further you are away from teaching, from helping students grow, helping students think more creatively, whoops, or from motivating students. It takes further away from education itself. It is like making up our appearances as a school and as an individual teacher.
So that's a challenge when people are feeling under pressure to change and do all this extra paperwork. So the Japanese teachers as well are feeling that doing communicative language teaching type of style classes is not the best use of their skill set because they're experts in.
And our students think all Japanese people, including them, have to be able to speak in English. However, our students are not average Japanese at all, but prospective students who will lead our future society as well as their scientific world. For those students, we should have put priority on providing more reading and writing opportunities.
So again, this idea of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, trying to keep the grammar style the students are used to. So, they don't want to teach in English because it doesn't seem a good use of their skills. So it's number 3 and number 4 are quite similar.
And it can be too artificial when we Japanese do that. But if your instructor is a native speaker, your presence gives them some motivation. And although some native speakers can have a very good understanding of Japanese, still the fake or the supposition degree is only 1 or 2 steps away.
And he's going to say what he means by it.
Let's suppose we have this kind of situation. We don't, but let's suppose we have this kind of situation. What would you do? But if we do that, it is kind of doubled. We can understand each other in Japanese, okay, but let's suppose we can't, okay? There's a whole big supposition, a fake.
So these are the 4 challenges to the adoption of these new classes, according to the Japanese teachers who are the main implementers of the new style, new forms. And here are some of the things that we've been innovating here. So there's a whole set of syllabi we've introduced. There's an English Lounge, English Help Centre, and we've moved to the semester-based courses, and there've been a large rise in number of native speaker teachers to equal the number of classes we need.
So in terms of actioning best practices, we all talk about best practices generally when we talk about management or about teaching or about professional activities. And really it goes down to research and scholarly collaboration, as our friend earlier mentioned, border crossing, student mobility or border crossing dialogue, in this case, student absenteeism, standardization of grading, faculty development, vision and mission, management, equipment and facilities, records and documentation compliance, as well as cooperative engagement. And
these are the things we've pulled out that we think Tokyo University of Science is doing right now. So we haven't got time to talk about them exactly, but these are the things which we think that perhaps other universities should pay attention to when they're reforming their English curriculums. So talking of complexities, we haven't got time to talk about complexities. We can show you the next slide, which is good. Well, should we go on to this one?
Just
go back one.
Yeah, just go back one. Just one more quickly, just quick. And we were talking about complexity, but complexity in terms of quality. What does quality mean to us? What does it mean to us in different institutional contexts? And of course, we've got the external motivation happening. Just down. But we'd encourage you to think, as we did, when we thought about, okay, which band is ours? Where are we at? And really, it depends where you're at in terms of the institution. And I talked about globalization, about it being a complex phenomena comprised of a number of dynamics that are putting a lot of pressure on all of us. And in a sense, within our own institution, within our own organizations or sub-organizations within those institutions, we're also having that kind of effect happening in terms of quality assurance, in terms of how we interpret that from our perspective. And so what we did was say, okay, well, from all of those bands, zero errors, excellence, threshold, transformation, enhancement, and fitness for purpose, from those, what elements sort of bubble to the surface? I think those were your words, Steve. And this is what we came up with. And it's really about quality assured internationalization in context. What is it in your context? Issues of what kind of university is it? What kind of organization is it? Traditional understanding, drive for perfection, specialization, strategic objectives, development and evolution, externally imposed standards, norms, and criteria, best practices, league tables, objectivity, rationale, education, skill acquisition, vision and mission, FAD, which comes from FAD theory, is it PAD, perceptions, objectivity, consistency, and potential suitability. Okay.
In a pantry.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.